Welcome to episode 9 of Running on OCP, where we speak with organizations using open compute in a variety of ways, including end users, software companies, and organizations who align to the OCP tenets. This week, we move to Asia, where I speak with the team at DCConnect. Now, DCConnect uses open compute hardware as the underlying infrastructure for their solution. They run an SDN mesh network fabric that allows customers to quickly adjust their bandwidth requirements in a matter of seconds using their solutions. So joining me today will be Jonathan Leung, who is the head of R&D for DCConnect, as well as Michael Rascoe, the head of solutions. So enjoy this week's episode of Running on OCP with the team at DCConnect. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jonathan, and how you got started with DCConnect.
Hi, so my name is Jonathan, and I'm the head of R&D at DCConnect. So before I started working at DCConnect, I was involved in working on the BSS OSS portals for provisioning virtual machines through a self-service customer portal. So when I started at DCConnect, I brought over the expertise in our BSS OSS portals to do the billing and provisioning. But this time, instead of VMs, we worked on data center interconnections and cloud express connections.
So very, very deep background in engineering. How about you, Michael? How did you get started in this world of open networking?
So my name is Michael Rascoe. I'm the head of solutions at DCConnect Global. I came to work for DCConnect Global after most of my career in telecoms and hardware. So coming over to a newer SDN player just sort of made sense as that was the way we view the network moving, kind of the consolidation of that hardware and networking layer.
And let's talk more about DCConnect specifically. It's a pretty interesting business model. What are some of the services, and try to explain to people who may not be familiar with the concept or the idea in a very beginner's layman's terms, what does DCConnect do?
So DCConnect allows customers and partners to take one port into our cloud fabric, or rather our federated cloud fabric, and not just reach any point on our network, which is comprised of about 300 POPs in the Asia Pacific region, but also reach any of our partner SDN providers through the same portal, so that you're able to order services and consume services from multiple, not just CSPs, but also multiple network providers all over one port. So we're laying somewhat of a cloud and carrier neutral foundation to the SDN, except where we operate our own POPs in Asia-Pac.
So how would people normally do this before DCConnect's offerings?
There really wasn't a way to do it. You'd have to pick up several ports on different networks, and then depending on what was happening with the pricing metrics or the scarcity of a particular route you wanted, order the services or the cloud on-ramp via your selected provider. With DCConnect, you can go in and order even completely off-net services through our federated network.
Yeah, interesting value proposition. Now, there's a chance that when you set up your service, you can use a variety of hardware. You can use the OEM, the traditional type of hardware. You can use open hardware. How did you first come to learn about open hardware, and why did you move toward these open designs?
Okay, so when we first started with doing the network interconnections, we used the OEM SDN controller. So by Brocade. And then we found out that because there are many features that we wanted, but then we needed to go, to petition to Brocade in order to get the services we need. And of course, that would take a lot of time, and it may not always be on the vendor's roadmap. And then in addition, as you know, Brocade has already been bought up by Broadcom, so they wouldn't be making any more new features. So, so in that case, we decided to look at the OCP and see what features it can offer us. And because it's all open, then it's very easy to add new features or to request new features. And we are also able to see the roadmap.
So more of a community-based roadmap is helpful in this case of you trying to deploy and grow your business.
Yes.
Good. Michael, anything you want to add to that around your interest and exposure to open hardware?
Sure, and I think John was spot on with it. We went over to the open hardware side of things from the OEM side simply because the OEMs weren't developing the features that we needed quick enough. And the reality is with some of these big guys, one of whom I used to work for, unless you're buying millions and millions of dollars of hardware from them every year, they're probably not going to try that hard to incorporate the features that you want into their APIs or into the controllers. So by switching over to the more open source side, and we initially started with Cumulus Linux, we had the ability and the great support of the engineers to use all of the feature set within that Linux platform, and then also build on any things that we needed to add ourselves without having to chase the vendor around in circles because of the open nature of Linux.
So you've been using OCP accepted switches now for quite some time. What are some of the early findings and results that you've seen on CapEx, OpEx, ease of use when deploying open hardware compared to, say, a traditional OEM?
So I think with the OCP journey we've been on so far, we probably kicked off the initial research about 2 years ago when we were having the trouble with the Brocade, and we've probably had them in production now for about 18 months. From a commercial side, we like working with the Edgecore switches, and then also the Cumulus Express switches, which are up until recently typically just Edgecore switches that have been rebranded. And it's a really good product set, as well as at a very attractive price point. So going in with license and hardware, it's typically like 1/3 the cost of the traditional OEMs.
And with all this mergers and acquisitions that's happened in the last year, 18 months on open networking, what is your opinion of how the entire market is shaping up with regards to vendors, supply chain offerings?
So I think there's a lot going on in the M&A industry for this vertical particularly, and some of it's good and some of it's a little bit concerning. We're watching certain companies kind of come onto the scene and try to purchase multiple assets to make their own OEMs. So that's why we're currently exploring how we can better leverage things like Sonic or various open networking OSs on top of our current Edgecore 100 gig switches.
Yeah, it is causing a lot of people to rethink a little bit of their strategy with all the movement in the industry. And like you said, some of it's very positive and some of it can be a bit concerning. So Jonathan, tell us about the challenge moving from an OEM to this open networking. What were some of the challenges that you experienced at the R&D level? And then how big is your team when you implemented this move to open networking?
So some of the challenges we faced was to move from a network-centric OS to a Linux-based OS like Cumulus. So basically, when we started with Cumulus, we needed to learn how to map all those Linux functions to control the network switches. However, once we were able to do that, because Cumulus Linux is just another flavor of Linux, so we were able to rapidly automate using DCConnect's universal controller, which is able to control any Linux device, including Cumulus. And this was a really major breakthrough for us. Another challenge is that with open networking, just as there are many different distributions of Linux like Red Hat and Ubuntu, so we'll also need to handle different open networking vendors. For example, there's Cumulus and Pluribus and other operators. But this is also where our universal controller comes into play, because it was designed from the start to be able to handle all kinds of network OS. We just need to learn the right commands that map into a set of generic commands that are recognized by our system, such as DCI creation, update, and deletion. So to future-proof our migration to OCP, we had to build our system with this kind of flexibility in mind.
And Michael, when you're thinking about building out the team and growing the business, how important is having that open source mindset? Are you out actively recruiting people that are hardcore Linux, or do you see people being able to make that transition from an OEM legacy hardware management over to a Linux-based model?
So in this case, I think it was easier for our software developers to get their head around it than it was for our network engineers. Because the software developers are very used to working in Linux environments, whereas guys that are 100% Cisco or H3C or Juniper, they're very almost religious about that command line for their particular flavor of networking gear that they've chosen to study. So we did have a little bit of resistance, and it took time to get some of our network engineers' heads around it. But John's team and the software developers were able to kind of help our network engineers understand, the Linux and the programmatical side of the house, and at the same time, where our devs might have been lacking a little bit in the network side, even though the engineers didn't necessarily understand the new CLI right off the bat. They understood, the architecture and how it needed to be built. So it was, I think, overall, really a good experience for our team to, come together, and instead of being, software developers and network engineers, everyone just kind of worked together to achieve a goal for the company. In terms of recruitment, we're pretty, I don't want to say easier or lax about prior experience, but we go in, we try to get guys right out of university or around that level that want to just come into the organization and build cool new things. So a lot of our guys that we got didn't even start necessarily with programming degrees. They had experience in it, but our founder and chairman is quite keen on us, hiring math majors and guys like that, in addition to the normal software developers and engineers. And that's led to a lot of the really cool developments we've been able to come up with, especially on the pricing algorithm side of it. Stuff that, we needed devs to implement it and the network engineers to make it tick, but without, the math backgrounds, it's difficult. So we're pretty agnostic on the kind of guys we go after, just as long as they're, tech savvy and have a bit of passion about themselves for the technology.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to approach the HR side of things and the resource skill set. Now, where exactly in APAC are your services now, and where do you expect to be growing the most in the coming year, including outside of APAC?
Sure. So one thing, we want to kind of knock off right out the bat is we will be growing a bit outside of APAC, but that's mostly just interconnectivity nodes. We don't want to step on our carrier partners' toes in their different markets. That's kind of the central philosophy around our business. So we've decided, hey, we have a lot of partners, ourselves included, that are really good at doing connectivity in particular parts of the world, and we don't want to, join that battle of driving the price down across the board and thus bringing kind of the service level down as well. So, we focus really on keeping, I think we're around 280 POPs in the mainland, about 40 here in Hong Kong, where DCConnect is based. And then we also have some interconnectivity points in Singapore, Los Angeles, Ashburn, and I think we're looking to bring something online in Western Europe for interconnects. But primarily, the expansion plans for on-net POPs will be in Southeast Asia for DCConnect, as to not, step on our carrier partners' toes.
Yeah, that's great. Really, I love the business model. I love the expansion plans that you guys have in place, and how aggressive your growth goals are. And speaking of strategies for DCConnect, you recently joined OCP. And in the past, like you said, you took 2 years of figuring out, is this open networking something that fits our business? And now you've taken it a step further, where you're going to participate within the OCP community and start to make contributions and contribute back to the community. So how important, from the entire team standpoint, was OCP and joining and contributing back, fitting into the overall strategy as you grow?
So I think OCP has been instrumental on assisting us getting in touch with the right folks and deploying the proper technology. So the logical thing to do was, once we got it working for ourselves, to join the group and see how we can help other folks grow in the area. So we've seen a lot of demand, not just for interconnections and partnerships to access our China resources and Asia-Pac resources, but carriers and data center operators reaching out to us for assistance on how they can automate their own network. So that's why we've actually now launched our new DC Gateway product, which we're working with regional service providers and edge data center players to get OCP certified hardware into their networks and their cloud on-ramps, and use our automation and the universal controller that Jonathan and his team have built to take control of their networks. So that will help us on two fronts. It will help us, pop more quickly, and we can also drive revenue through it. And it also brings the ability for service providers and edge data centers, mostly in the developing market, to rapidly go from an antiquated architecture to the latest and greatest in open computing, just by deploying some of our switches over their infrastructure.
Well, it's great to have you as part of the community, for sure, and your expertise can add a lot to the overall networking project. So Jonathan, as more companies look to try open networking in Southeast Asia and in APAC, what advice would you give to enterprise companies who want to try this model, who may be used to very legacy OEM solutions?
So the advice that I would give, well, first, I think is to just be open to new opportunities, adopt a mindset of being open to new technologies. There's no need to really reinvent the wheel. Like you can try to use open networking, but you don't need to replace every one of your internal switches. You can start just by putting in extra switches on the edges only, and then connect all your edges through the SDN fabric. So by creating a fabric, then you can create network connections automatically between the edges, which are going through your legacy network.
So try on the edges first, and then create that fabric. How about you, Michael? Any advice for enterprises as they look at this new model?
I think, in the vein of what John was going along, the platform that we have and what we've tried to follow with OCP is to be underlay agnostic. So the way we built our platform out and the way, we, recommend our partners and enterprise customers to go forward with it is, to try to build it out in an open standpoint by deploying the edge switches, which give you control over whatever underlay is there. So we're agnostic, again, in the sense that we don't care if it's an MPLS underlay or layer 1 or DWDM. We can take that and we can emulate it up to where we need it to be to then run the VXLAN tunnels through the network. So we just really try to flatten the network. You can leave all of that existing, hard infrastructure in place and just kind of layer the switches in as a proof of concept. And then as you start from the outside and then start upgrading the core as you get comfortable with the new command lines or GUIs that are offered by the different vendors or controller providers.
That's some good advice. So let's say that I'm a carrier or an enterprise in the region that wants to try your service without a lot of upfront investment. How do they go about engaging your team and trying what some of the services that you offer?
So they can always just reach out to us on alliance@dcconnectglobal.com. Alternatively, most of our staff is on LinkedIn, so that's also a good place to find us. and to do things like proof of concept for a customer, like a carrier customer's network or a data center company that wants to deploy this sort of fabric in their facility. We can facilitate it quite easily if the partner can procure the switches, and then we're very happy to help set up a small POC. And then after we've shown it works, then we can get into a larger discussion about how they want to operate. So we work with some guys on the model where we get a license fee for our software. One time we turn it over to them and then they operate their own platform. In other cases, we retain the operating of the edge, not their core, but we'll operate the edge SDN, and they can use all of our portal features. And then we typically agree on some sort of revenue share for services sold.
Okay. And I do know that the folks at Edgecore are very complimentary in helping organizations with POCs as well to help mitigate that upfront investment. So if they can work either directly with you to work with Edgecore or reach out to Edgecore directly as well on the switch side.
Totally. OCP's helped us with that relationship and getting it where it needs to be. And also by being an Asia Pacific based company, Edgecore is in Taiwan. We're over here in Hong Kong. So, that's helped us with the relationship quite a bit. And, either, reach out to your Edgecore rep and ask them if they can, help out with some POC gear to work in collaboration with DCConnect for testing. Or else reach out to us if you don't have an Edgecore rep, and we'll gladly get you in touch with a good distributor or a VAR in your region.
Great. So as we wrap up here, what you touched on where you're headed with DCConnect on some future expansion plans. Anything else on what's next for DCConnect? Any future business models or any things that would be noteworthy?
I think the biggest one was the launch of the DC Gateway product. So prior to that, we've been selling the services and then kind of working to find partners to go into these markets together with and do these POCs. But now we've actually seen it kind of flip, whereas we were sort of soliciting folks to work with us and get this tech out into the field. Now it's the other way around. Don't get me wrong. We're still reaching out and trying to further the cause, but we've seen it kind of flip from mostly outbound to mostly inbound in the past year or so, as carriers kind of continually get fed up with the OEMs, and they've seen the leaps and bounds that SDN is making. And with our platform, it kind of allows you the best of both worlds. You can monetize your own existing resources as well as other partner carrier resources on the network, and everybody is able to make some money there. So it's a good proposition and a good solution for carriers looking to add this service to their portfolio.
Agree. Good advice. Jonathan, any last words that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'd actually like to add to what Michael has said about some of our future plans. So one of the things that we are very keen on is to create a system where anyone can search our pricing. So because we are able to connect with many different vendors, many different API partners, we're actually able to calculate pricing from between any locations in the world. And then we have our algorithms that allow us to calculate the k shortest paths between any two locations. So I can provide not only the lowest cost path, but maybe the lowest latency path, the second lowest cost, the second lowest latency, the third, and so on. And then we can provide all these as options on our portal. And then we can display them to the user. So we're interested in, because we can, we're able to select between many different partners, and we're able to display the lowest cost one to the user. So if there's a partner whose price has suddenly increased, that's okay, because we can just use another partner.
So that price optimization service is now available or will be available?
So we are actually using it like ready to calculate our own pricing. but I believe we will also want to make it more publicly available in the future.
That's great. I'm sure the market will be quite interested in that price optimization capability. So, Jonathan, Michael, thank you very much for sharing your insights on open networking. I've followed your journey for the last 18 months or so, and it's been great to see your business expand and the amount of commitment that you've shown to OCP and taking it a step further now by becoming an OCP community member. It's just going to be continuing to grow and grow with your commitment and your community involvement. So thanks again, Michael and Jonathan. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, it was great to talk with you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Yes, Steve, once again, thank you for the time and thank you for the platform. Looking forward to continuing to work with and contribute to the open source community.
Great. I will be back with my key takeaways from my conversation in just a minute. After speaking with Jonathan and Michael, there were a few things that I took away from that conversation. The first is the passion around Linux. We see this time and time again with companies that want to choose to work with Linux-based systems as opposed to proprietary legacy software and hardware. And the second is when Jonathan mentioned you do not need to move everything over at once to open hardware. You can start at the edges and then migrate as your team becomes more comfortable or when it makes sense for you. And the third is when Michael highlighted the CapEx savings, a third compared to what you would get when purchasing OEM legacy-based hardware. So CapEx savings, Linux-based systems, taking it small steps at a time to move your entire ecosystem over to open source hardware and open source software. So great discussion today from the team at DCConnect. If you have any questions about their solution or how to get in touch with Michael or Jonathan, I'd be happy to make those intros. Email me at steve@opencompute.org. And I appreciate you listening and look forward to more episodes of Running on OCP in the coming weeks. Cheers.